So anything you say can and will be used against you.
You know where your kids are?
Yeah, that's the one I'm gonna lay out when. Good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock, or it's actually 10:14 in the East. We're running a little late. And do you know where your children are? Um, we just wish everybody a good morning. Okay. Whew, we're hanging in here. We've both had death
Oh,
threats this week, so we're really in good shape.
oh yeah, par for the course.
Yep.
All I have to say is I DGAF meditation. Like,
What is that medication?
don't give up, and then
Don't
the
give up the ship.
don't give a F.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Well, just everything happens, and it is what it is. And if I stay in the present, then I'm here.
Yeah,
And if I don't, that's a problem.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's been wild. Uh,
Yeah,
Sora asked me what.
yeah, and I don't try to make any meaning out of it. I don't try
Yeah,
to make meaning at all out of it. It occurs, and I mean, even it's probably apropos as a religious text, you know, live your life, but not as something else.
yeah. Um, and good morning, Sheree. Okay, so today um, we are reading Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions, edited sort of somewhere, edited by Mary Stein and Thomas Arst. And this is volume 2 of a 5-volume series of essays written by Jungian analysts about the Red Book. Um, and so far, we've been enjoying it. I just lost the page. Okay, I got the page. And so we shall begin. The Red Book as a Religious Text by Lionel Corbett. I guess I should talk about Lionel's bona fides here. Lionel Corbett, MD, trained in medicine and psychiatry in England and as a Jungian analyst at the C.G. Jung Institute of Chicago. And Dr. Corbett is a professor of depth psychology at Pacifica Graduate Institute in Santa Barbara, California. His primary interests are the religious function of the psyche, especially the way in which personal religious experience is relevant to individual psychology. The development of psychotherapy as a spiritual practice and the interface of Jungian psychology and contemporary psychoanalytic thought. He is the author of numerous professional papers and 5 books: Psyche and the Sacred, The Religious Function of the Psyche, The Sacred Cauldron, Psychotherapy as a Spiritual Practice, The Soul in Anguish, Psychotherapeutic Anguishes in Suffering, and Understanding Evil, a guide for the psychotherapists. He is the co-editor of 4 volumes of collected papers, Psyche Stories, Depth Psychology, Meditations in the Field, Psychology at the Threshold, and Jung and Aging. His contact email is corb@pacifica.edu. Okay, so this is Lionel Corbett's essay. The Red Book as a religious text.
You know,
Go
interesting about his work,
ahead.
basically with the sacred and basically his work is all about the sacred and the profane, as
Yeah,
it were. So I can look at Mozart and Salieri, one versus the other, and Salieri being the evil, the jealousy piece.
yeah,
And what's interesting about that is, as Jordan Peterson said, he said some people are trying to look at childhood trauma as their problem. And the reality is, some people just simply encountered someone who is truly malevolent.
yeah.
You look into those eyes, some people do not recover because the
Right.
terror is real. And I think that's interesting because everyone trying to find the inner child and et cetera, et cetera. Um, just like this week, where you get true evil staring you in the face, and do you stare back? Um, because to me, all I think is, well, everybody gets their 6 foot pine box, so you mess with the wrong person. And but I think that's interesting because there's the whole attention piece from childhood. And was there neglect, or was there an evil that someone simply survived? So I mean, Lionel Corbett's work has so much to do. It's not right versus wrong. There's a real deep natural good versus evil, and those qualities are human, not natural.
Yeah,
And so I don't want to express any empathy for the evil um, people, but
not at all.
not at all. But I do often, from a forensic sense, wonder about the source. Um,
Yeah.
what happened to them, and not to excuse it, but what flipped that switch? Because it's so extreme that even if you build up badness over time, you wouldn't get to that extreme. I mean, you can't make that mountain. It had to, something had to.
So
I think you,
Cherie asks a question which I have no idea about, so it's all for you. Did Spinoza believe in good and evil?
that's a tricky question, asking about someone who spoke evil if he believed in what he did. Um, uh, I don't, he is so not top of mind right now. Let me think about that, Sheree. And
Yeah,
because I've been on a multi-year bent of no philosophers because they're little boys trying to get attention from their dad.
yeah,
Um, look how smart I am. I'm going to prove this and show my work. And that's a lot of attention getting. I
yeah.
think that a lot of philosophy comes from emotional neglect that creates intellectual overload. Let me think about that, Shree. And I will say what I'll probably come to is I don't know because
Yeah.
I never met the man.
Yeah. Um, yeah, my guess, based on the limited amount I know about Spinoza, who was a Dutchman, um, is that he probably did. Um,
And what's interesting is he probably did, and that's in conflict with his philosophy. I mean,
yeah,
the one where God and nature are the same. I mean, I feel and I believe that. I mean, I don't even think I have inner divinity. I think I'm divine because God is the universe from my perspective. And I'm just a fractal of said universe. And we all are.
yeah,
But his remembering is it Deus Mona? It's coming to mind, the one, the one divine, capital N nature, um, pretty much is represented by the symbol of the yin yang,
yeah,
the disappearing path. And that to me, good and evil, I think he wouldn't make that judgment, because I think if I put it in my own words rather than trying to make his up, um, if you look at psychology, happy, sad, glad, mad. There's not really much anything else than those.
Yeah.
They don't they don't attribute themselves to the four functions: intuition, feeling, thinking, sensation. But they're also just emotional weather. And I think let the weather wash through, and you won't deal with good and evil. You'll deal with what is going on right now. So deal with nature. So in terms of Spinoza, um, if he believed in good and evil, then I don't think he fully immersed himself in the one that he was so much speaking about. Because the one does not know anything about the other. Because with the one, there is no other. The other is inside, around, within, about. Um, so
Well,
with
okay.
Spinoza,
So
he
let's talk
did.
about Jung for a minute. Jung clearly believed that both existed, and he hoped that in the end, good will prevail a little bit. But he was realistic about that because he believed in the opposites and the balance of the opposites, and um, and he simply hoped that good would get a little bit more measure in the end, and so we can hope for that.
That's a really wonderful point, because I think part of evil is drowning in the soul, and part of naivete is drowning in the spirit. I mean, too much light, too much dark. I mean, you drowning in the ground, you drowning in the water. Well, stop swimming with your boots on and come right down.
Yeah.
And then you can have the angel and the devil on your shoulders, but they're just like ailerons on a plane.
Yeah.
You can navigate, but they don't rule. So I think when one or the other is too present, um, that's where the problems arise, because then it's us and them. It's always their problem. They caused, they this, they that. And I just keep coming back to Debbie's otherness and the fear of the otherness, where there's a huge amount of avoidance in people who actively fear the other.
Yeah.
And in a sense, no matter what they say, they're just confessing their own stuff. And it's tiring to listen to.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, Richard says so many saints predicted the generation and worship of the self is exactly what they said would happen. Yeah, I'm sure everybody's right, right?
well, that, and I think worshiping the self is a problem. Being yourself is beyond worship. So, I mean, there's a self centered, meaning you have a center,
Yeah,
not self righteous, where you're conceited and you're the center of the universe. Of course, you're the center of the universe, yours, and so is everyone else's. And as long as you don't make interference patterns, I think, with other people's quote unquote universe, um, there you go. That's called interaction.
so
Otherwise,
Cherie says Alfred North Whitehead used to take I used to take classes with a young man who studied his work for 15 years. Okay, and what's the significance of that? I've never heard the name, but in keeping with what Jordan said, I wear a bracelet that says on it, "Be all you can be."
yeah, there you
Now,
go.
now, "Be all you can be" is a motto of the U.S. Army, which was developed by a friend of mine named Frank Burns, Colonel Frank Burns. And if you
Frank Burns from
he was the commanding officer of Delta Force, not the special operators, but the Delta Force that was involved in change in the Army. And so if you ever saw the movie Men Who Stare at Goats, um, that would have been his outfit. Um, but I knew Frank in the uh, late 80s through the 90s. Um, and and he was a good man. And so he came up with this motto for the Army: be all you can be. And we had a Army recruiter in our school a few weeks ago, and I thought about it, and I finally took one of his bracelets, so I'm wearing it now. Be all you can be, because I believe in that, as well as the Marine Corps motto: the Marine Corps builds men,
Well, so
and women.
the Alfred North Whitehead, um, let me see, polar to Aquinas, rejects divine omnipotence, yet he claims that God's persuasive power is required for everything to exist and to occur. And so it's interesting, as I, to Cherie's question or statement, because she didn't really ask a question, um, there's a conflict, I think, in that philosophy where he's mixing faith with philosophy. So talk about magical thinking, and in a sense, it's trying to again go talk to dad, go talk to daddy, get some attention, get some approval,
And
because you're having all these things that they look and sound brilliant, but honestly, they make too much sense to be worth a damn most times.
yeah, and Sheree says, have you seen the documentary Sacrificing Liberty in 2020? No, I haven't, Sheree,
I have not.
but yeah, maybe I'll
Sacrificing liberty. I'll write that.
look at it. Things are always working, and once I heard Jung's position on this issue of belief, I was convinced that Jung was absolutely right. And Jung's was asked on a video, which you can easily find here on YouTube. He was asked, "Do you believe in God?" And he says, "Oh, well, very complicated, but I have no need to believe. I know."
Yeah.
And
Oh, it's down here. It's
yeah, KNOW. And
not up here.
in that instant, I realized that I also know, and that was in 2005, so 20 years ago, I realized that um, Carl Jung found the living God, where the living God lives, and how the living God goes about doing the work of the Godhead. Okay, and because of that, I have been very seriously studying and talking about Jung for the last 20 years. And I've been studying it for Jungian psychology for 38 years now. So, um,
And I would parrot that, and I'll also say, because about the same amount of time, to me, the psychological functions, I attribute the hara, 1 point, or the tantian, which is 2 acuinches below the navel, the source, as intuition. And then up to the solar plexus is feeling, which is your personal identity. And then heart is thinking. And then throat is sensation. And then in the head, you integrate all of them. And I think that's where a lot of people get into, let's work out these chakra blocks, because the head is supposed to integrate all 4 of those at one time.
you know,
And if you don't, quote unquote, feel it in the bottom 3, you shouldn't allow it to become, have the bouncer, oh, not on the list. Let the weather wash
well,
through.
what I would say very simply is if you have to ask that question, then for you, there is no God. Um,
Yeah,
and
because yeah, you're petitioning, you're
yeah,
pleading, you're hoping, you're
and
wishing,
and
and
when you get to the point where you know, and you'll know when you get to that point, um, because as long as you have to ask the question, do you believe? Then you don't have, there's no God for you. But once you know, there's no doubt. Okay, there's absolutely no doubt. Um,
well, you know,
and
to support that, Dr. Gabor Mate um, aptly said, um, if you have anxiety, it is an illusion because if something was truly life or death, you would have already acted and done something about it to not die already. If you're holding on to it, you're basically, my quote is, did you have a bad day or did you have a bad 5 minutes and you're still milking it?
yeah,
So
well,
it's
I
like,
mean, it's something
be
like
present.
this. Um, if I happen to be getting into academic regalia right now because we're going to have a graduation ceremony at my school. And because of that, I decided to acquire a set of academic regalia. And one of the reasons is that it's a lesson for my students. Um, and if, and the importance of education was emphasized to me that my first day of college when our faculty came to the chapel for convocation wearing academic regalia. And somehow that made a tremendous impression on me. And and I never owned a set of academic regalia, although I earned a doctorate in 1974, because my law school class decided we would wear suits for some, some reason. Okay. But
The,
it
uni-
is, huh?
the uniform, the martial arts gi, the standardized surface look.
Yeah. And someone did rent academic regalia for me once when I participated in a graduation ceremony at the University of Maryland Graduate School where I was teaching back in the late 80s. And so I did wear it one other time. But this time I got it simply as a symbol that expresses something that I can't express any other way to my students. And so it's not a matter of self-aggrandizement, um, because I'm way beyond that. But I do want this teaching for my students. And so I ordered the whole set and I've got most of it in place. But you know, if uh, but I don't need it for my own self-aggrandizement because I live a very complicated life in a difficult school, and um, I am a symbol of that every day. And um, you know, we've one of the administrators of the school district is going to come and observe me, and uh, we're having a discussion about um, whether I should be teaching formal lessons every day. And I said, you know, honestly, I teach a lesson every day I walk in the school. In fact, two lessons because I'm old and I'm handicapped. And
Well, and people don't understand that the older you are, the less a life sentence matters. So they should understand why you were old. You,
yeah,
you know how to deal.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people these days too would, point a gun to solve their discomfort and remove the discomfort. And well, once they shoot you, they still haven't removed the discomfort. Now they shot you. Um, I don't think that should happen to you. I don't think that should happen to me or anyone. There's this word. It's a wonderfully, angelic word, discussion
Yeah.
and communication and listening and stating. Because I think the whole thing with people basically afraid of themselves.
Yeah. Well, Cherie brings up a sore subject for me personally, um, because saying the truth told for the first time about Israel's massacre of the USS Liberty crewmen. Lost video footage seen for the first time in decades. Shocking first eye time first eye time witnesses. Gut wrenching. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and descriptions of carnage unleashed by Israeli gunboats, warboats, and submarine connecting the dots that link LBJ to a failed false flag to start a war with Egypt, uncensored USS Liberty crewmen. Um,
I'm going to plead the fifth.
yeah, well, the
That's
Liberty has been shut up for whatever 60 years, almost 58 years since it happened in the 6 Day War, and it happens that at least two of my high school classmates were indirectly involved in it, and they are very irritated, as I am, that it was hushed up. Um, and Yeah, I have two friends. One that was on the radios when it was happening live, and one whose fiance was aboard the Liberty and who was never right again. And
well, and I think I will
Sherry
say,
says my brother Tommy Wayne Wheeler was on the USS Liberty. Well, condolences for that. I hope he did not die as many did. Liberty went into Malta to avoid sinking after that event.
right.
Um, but anyway,
I
you
will
can't.
say, I will say, once you find something out like that has been shushed up, don't go into conspiracy theory. Use that as an actuality to unwrap some of your other beliefs of what you have been told.
Yeah,
Because to me, that's just like an attorney. That's simply another fact structure to affect the calculus of what you believe, what you know, what you feel. Um, and then it's like when I'm proven wrong on something, joy actually enters
yeah,
because now I have an opportunity for growth and discovery and learning that is completely against whatever I was indoctrinating myself with.
yeah,
And I don't need to cling to the I'm right like some lifeboat.
yeah.
I'm
And
not
the
not
other the other one that has always bothered me, and then in the Navy, and I've been in the Navy all my life indirectly. Um, the Navy also hushed up uh, how the USS Forrestal was nearly sunk by an errant American missile fired from its deck. I won't
yeah,
go into it
fire.
further than that, and I won't speak of the personalities involved. However, um, I don't know, a bunch of sailors were killed, and the ship almost sank as a result of it. Um, and And so that was almost taking out a capital ship, and it was a stupid thing.
Well,
On
and that brings up the concepts of shame.
yeah,
It brings up the concepts of avoidance, and it brings up also, when do you avoid something so you can just move on, put a fence around it, so to speak, or when do you openly share it?
yeah,
And so you don't always have to share your wrongs, but just like me, when interviewing someone, what's your biggest failure?
yeah.
I don't really.
Well, the Forrestal proved to me that karma is perfect, and I'll leave it at that. That's all.
That's
That's all
that
that's
that
needed.
tidy's head up.
Okay,
That tidy's head.
so we're going to read from this book. We're going to read this essay, "The Red Book as a Religious Text" by Lionel Corbett. We've done the introduction of Lionel Corbett, and so I will begin. In his introduction to the Red Book, Liber Novus, Sonu Shamdasani lists several central aspects of this work, one of which is, quote, an attempt to grasp the future religious development of the West, unquote. It is this element of Jung's text that I will pursue in what follows. I will make the case that for various reasons, the Red Book is a religious text, not only because it deals with multiple religious themes, but also in the sense of Jung's own understanding of the nature of religion. Based partly on the etymology of this word, Jung thinks of religion as careful attention to the numinous manifestations of the objective psyche. In the Red Book, this level of psyche appears in the form of figures such as Philemon and Salome. Now, I'll read that definition one more time. Jung thinks of religion as careful attention to the numinous manifestations of the objective psyche. Okay.
And I
Uh,
think that that's important because careful attention is much different than worship.
right. Okay.
And I think
Um,
that's the distinction, because that's a careful attention is 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 valid love, is valid attention, um, but worship is not love. Worship is not life. It's pleading, it's petitioning, it's childish, it's needy. So I think careful attention, that's a wonderful distinction there. Rather careful attention for religion instead of worship.
yeah.
Then it's not ideological and it's not indoctrinated.
Yeah. And so, Sheree, if you're in the West Coast, I might consider introducing you to one of my high school classmates, but um, because of what you've written here, but I'm not going to get into it now. Okay, so we're talking about um, numinous manifestations. Okay, the proclamation of a new religion. My contention that the Red Book is a religious text partly relies on one of Jung's dialogues with his soul, in which he was told that his calling is the proclamation of the new religion. I have discussed this in more detail elsewhere. The soul tells Jung that he has received a revelation that he should not hide. This is his vocation and a priority. Jung is surprised by this and says he has no idea how to accomplish such a task, but the soul tells him he has the necessary knowledge and he should publish his material. The soul adds, quote, the way is symbolic rather than rational. Throughout the Red Book, the soul behaves like an autonomous content of the unconscious, if not a personification of the unconscious itself. Or, in Jung's words, quote, God and the soul are essentially the same when regarded as personifications of an unconscious content, unquote. Because Jung believes that the experience of God is indistinguishable from the manifestations of the unconscious, writers such as Edward Edinger believe that Jung is proclaiming a new form of spirituality based on direct contact with the objective psyche. The Red Book often tells us that we need a new approach to old religious truths, and as Jung will later note in a letter, present-day Christianity is not the final truth. Some of the seeds of this attitude are seen during Jung's conversation with the anchorite Ammonius. This sage, this sage figure tells Jung that we do not know the hidden meaning of the Gospels or the meaning that is yet to come. According to Ammonius, quote, every subsequent form of religion is the meaning of the antecedent. Quote, the implication is that we can only know the meaning of a particular stage of religion when we are in the following stage, so that we can now look back at traditional Christianity and understand it with new eyes. I'm going to stop there for a minute. Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, every subsequent form of religion is the meaning of the antecedent, meaning it's the solution. It's what has occurred. It's what has been gardener style grown. That way, I think the problem with, I mean, undying faith is one thing, but dyed in the wool is another thing. So, I mean, you die in the wool, you're sticking to the indoctrination of what's seen, but the sheep, the lamb, whatever is in the wool, grew the wool. So that's the look for the living God rather
Yeah.
than look for the what you see in the institutions God. Um, the implication is that we can only know the meaning of a particular stage of religion when we are in the following stage, which
Yeah.
means focus. I mean, it's one of those don't be yourself, just live yourself. And you'll notice the changes and you'll see when you're, I mean, I look even now, I'm in a milestone in the moment.
Yeah.
I have no idea what that means. I have no, I mean, there's my Saturn return coming up, all this stuff. I could attribute it to lots of things, but the motions of the previous don't matter. It's so now there's like more than ever dosing myself with my own medicine, being comfortable with the not knowing while daily still getting everything done.
Yeah.
And I'll start to notice the difference. And I mean, part of it is the whole DGAF thing where, you know, you're not apologizing for anything because you're not doing wrong or hurtful things to people. I mean, I never was, but it's interesting to me then that kind of sometimes tests my patience with, well, I'm kind of tired of I don't know. Can't I
Yeah.
get to a no again? And the reality is it's kind of like a drive-through speed in a car. Is it 62 miles an hour? Is it 84 miles an hour? Where, you know, not much anymore, but it used to be that, you know, your alignment was off and at a certain revolution per minute on the tires, your car would get all shaky. Well, well, do you back off of the shaky or you drive through speed? You know,
Yeah.
hit the gas harder and get through it to re-resonate. So I
Yeah.
think the drive-through speed is important because sometimes it's important to back off of that speed
Yeah.
because you're causing the wobbly. But there are points where the wobbly is just what it's supposed to be and keep going. And so I think there's interesting here with, you know, faith versus religion. versus worship versus just living. And again, I mean, the disappearing path comes to mind every single time. There's this otherness that is my friend. And as I say, making besties with beasties, you know, that
Yeah.
the dragon, for example, doesn't hoard the gold. That's its garden. Because if you look, dragons' fangs and nails, claws are made of precious metals. So they're ingesting that, not hoarding that. So, don't laugh at another's bounty, so to speak, because what nourishes them may not even be compatible with you.
Yeah. Well, at the risk of boring some of our longtime followers, I just want to show one of my numinous experiences. It's very hard to catch them. Okay, very hard to catch them, especially on video or in images. But on one occasion, I did do that successfully, and it was one of the most meaningful in my life. And for that reason, I'm going to share this experience again. Okay, so there came a time in my life where I was very down, depressed, upset, and although I'm not a very heavily religious Christian uh, person, I decided to go to the Naval Academy Chapel, which is about 2 miles from where I live. And I find that that space to me is um, very soulful and obviously very beautiful and very meaningful to me because it's the burial place of John Paul Jones, the father of the U.S. Navy, whose remains are in a crypt in the basement of the chapel, in a very beautiful sarcophagus. Um, but anyway, I went into the chapel because it has two beautiful Tiffany stained glass windows. And I wanted to just gather my thoughts. And it was a dark day. It was very not rainy, but it was very heavily overcast with clouds. And I sat down in a pew, which allows me to look up toward the left arm. The pew is in the right arm of the cathedral, and it is in the form of a cathedral, this chapel. And so I was seated in the right arm of the chapel, looking up at the left arm, where there is one of these windows. And this is what happened. Um, and this was, I don't care what anybody thinks about it, but for me, it was a very numinous experience. So I was sitting in the dark chapel. There was no light whatsoever. And this is what happened. No, there was no artificial light at the time in the chapel. And this light came down, and it came down only on me. Uh, and of course, you can see the Tiffany window here with Christ lifting up the sun. And you can see the difference in quality of the stained glass window by looking at the windows right below the balcony. This is the balcony of the chapel, and just below it are three more stained glass windows. And you can see very clearly that there's a clear distinction in the quality of the stained glass. And so suddenly just my whole demeanor changed in less than 5 seconds. And I said, oh my God, nobody's ever going to believe this unless I take a picture of it. So I took a picture of it, and then I decided to turn the camera back on myself, which I rarely do, but on this occasion, I decided to take a selfie. And as you can see, the light was only on me and my face and not anywhere else in the chapel. Behind me is another stained glass window, which somebody said it looks like a gargoyle, but it's actually the seal of the U.S. Naval Academy, um, in
But
stained
also, it looks like
glass.
one of the Cerberus. It looks like one of the Cerberus dogs with its mouth gaping open, attacking.
Right. And normally that would be lit equally with the Tiffany window, but therefore you can see how dark it was that particular day. And so all of a sudden you see me with this big smile on my face, um, because my whole feeling about the moment and about where I was in my life had changed. And in just an instant, like in 5 to 10 seconds total, this was over, and it completely changed my outlook on what was going on in my life. And so that's a numinous moment, and partially it is because it's that's how a religious experience was sometimes depicted in the movies back in those days. Back in my youth, I remember several movies where there would be a light that would come on the face of the sainted person, and I claim no such thing. Obviously, the sun goes past that point in the cosmos every day, and
Well,
it
your picture there, I mean, your picture there is, it makes an important distinction, I think, when there's the numinous moments we are conscious of, that we record and that we share. And then every time joy enters, we don't share it or not share it. It's just personal and we felt it. So it may
yeah,
be recorded in a memory, but then it's not expressed publicly. But
yeah,
that then enliven how you share with others. Because I think it's not do only good, it's do only beneficent. I mean, is it necessary? Is it kind? Um, is it useful?
yeah,
And sometimes it's only useful to ourselves. But I find, for example, I mean, lately, if I have the urge to judge, I first judge that urge,
yeah,
because really something that's probably irritating me that I don't realize I'm irritated, and there's no reason to weaponize something that someone else didn't even do. Um, so I think that's a fitful point of learning.
yeah.
Difference between
So, so
offense.
there's several of these around in on this YouTube channel. This particular one was particularly meaningful to me. Another one was I caught on video when I was reading Answer to Job. One time I was reading it on video, and the incident occurred at a very profound moment. I'm not going to say more about it, but um, it was something that could not have been planned, not possibly, and yet it was hugely meaningful to me. Um, and so that's what we're talking about when we say a numinous moment, and um, you'll know it when you see it. That's all I can say. Okay.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about that is don't cross check it. don't just experience it
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you deserve it. The thing is,
Right.
because you're having it, you deserve it. Now, if it's bad, you, you don't deserve that. Don't take that. I mean, put your
Right.
hands up and say no. But so there's a kind of cosmic bouncer you can induce in yourself called discernment, where no, you don't deserve bad things to happen to you. And you literally can retune your magnet so that it's not dealing with the past all the time. It's not hoping for the future all the time. It's right now.
Yeah.
What's going on? And that experiential modality, I think, is to me, I mean, this is my brain damage, but it's the only way. Um,
Right.
and I find that, for example, I mean, several weeks ago, I had someone come at me really hard. I mean, physically. I just kind of nothing. And they were, I mean, actually forehead to forehead, yelling, screaming. I just let them exhaust themselves. They just kept going. I realized later that I didn't even clench my fists. They were just down by my by my sides. And they went and went and went and went. And I said, well, at one point, well, you're the property manager, so
Yeah.
you you make the rules.
Right.
And and he said, Mother Goddess makes rules. And I said, oh, I stand corrected. You just enforce them.
Yep.
And
Okay. Well, let's read
well,
on here because we've
they
burned an hour. We don't have much time, so let's read on. In the Red Book, the assimilation of the existing tradition is experienced as a ritual process when, with a great deal of horror and resistance, Jung is asked to eat the liver of a divine child who has just been sacrificed. In traditional symbolism, the liver was considered to be a sacred organ, often used in divination. It represents the life force, or sometimes the seat of the soul. By participating in this evil murder, Jung says, I redeemed the primordial powers and added them to my soul. This act symbolizes a literal embodiment or incorporation of the spirit of the divine child into himself. Jung believed this act was redemptive in the sense that it was an act of healing analogous to the sacrifice of the Mass. A few days later, Jung is told that the new religion only expresses itself in the transformation of human relations. And at the visible level, religion consists of a new ordering of human affairs. It certainly did happen that way for me, obviously. In a footnote, Shamdasani points out that in a seminar the following year, Jung says individual relations lay the form of the invisible church. These are interesting comments since Jung's subsequent approach to religion typically focuses on experiences of the self and the objective psyche and does not stress the religious importance of relationship.
and in that sense, the church grew up, no longer looking to the pulpit for approval. The congregation itself is becoming the church.
Right. And I did have a numinous experience once in church during a church service, which was the christening of my grandson, my eldest grandchild. Um, and we were in a Presbyterian church, which had been important to my family since 1810, believe it or not. And we got to the point in the service where we were to introduce the baby to the congregation. And I was carrying the baby in my arms, and at that moment, I saw a special light come over the faces of each member of the congregation as I brought the baby over to them. And it wasn't a physical light like the one at the Naval Academy Chapel. It was a light that obviously was conjured from within me. Um, but nonetheless, it was quite real to me and still is. And it was a
What's
special.
interesting about that, I think it's what's interesting about that especially is that there are now films of the exact moment when a sperm fertilizes an egg, or
Mhm.
otherwise said, it's not the fastest sperm, it's the one that the ovum actually accepts. There are plenty that are, pecking on the boundary, but the egg chooses, they've started to realize. And what's interesting is right when that occurs and they unite, there's a flash of light.
Ah,
So that's the numinous to me is a rebirth of life, where in this moment, something has just been hatched, something has just been fertilized, something has just been starting to grow.
yeah.
And I think I think accepting and and ingesting those moments, basically joy is entering.
Yeah, joy. There's definitely joy involved in every one of these for me.
And I
Okay.
think that one thing I would say is you deserve it. I mean, take that. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And you don't want to hoard joy, but this is kind of impossible. But it's it's one of those things where if you notice those things, I find there's a calming where I am stronger in a calmer way.
Yeah.
And that's different than, beating your chest kind of strong.
Well, and since that came to mind, I am reminded that I really must tell my grandson that story. Um,
Yeah. Because then
and
you're sharing the life you received with him.
yeah, yeah, by all means. Okay, so let me just see how long this is going to be because uh,
Because we finished that section.
yeah, we
This is
finished that section and we'll keep going,
no,
but
this is only a page, 1.25 pages long. So
yeah, out of 12 pages, we've read two. So
yeah, this next
we're gonna be working with this for a while. But we'll work on the prophetic nature and
of the
then so I'm gonna read and then turn this over to you for a moment while I step out. By using the weight of what is to come as the title of Liber Primus. Okay, so he's talking about the very first, sometimes people call it the prologue chapter of the Red Book, the first actual chapter of the Red Book, which is called The Way of What Is to Come. By using the way of what is to come as the title of Liber Primus, Jung gives the reader a sense of the prophetic nature of the work. Shamdasani notes that although the book was presented as a prophetic work, apparently this was not to his taste, to Jung's taste. Jung was more interested in the relationship between psychology and religion, the ways in which numinous experience is translated into doctrine and dogma, the importance of religion for the personality, and the process of making religion. Jung begins with four prophecies about the coming of Christ, so that the work has a prophetic style, whether or not the subsequent content is prophetic. Much of it proved to be so for Jung himself, although it remains to be seen how much is generalizable. Certainly not everything in the book is applicable to others, and throughout the text, Jung consistently insists that everyone has to find his own path. quote, my path is not your path. May each go his own way, unquote. He rejects the notion of imitation. Quote, the new God laughs at imitation and discipleship, unquote. And he rejects the idea of following a redeemer. Quote, woe betide those who live by way of examples, unquote. We must live out our own life. Quote, this life is the way, the long sought after way to the unfathomable, which we call divine, unquote. And, quote, I will be no savior, no lawgiver, no master teacher unto you, unquote. The time has come when each, and then another quote, the time has come when each must do his own work of redemption, unquote. Jung notes that Christ, quote, imitated no one, unquote, so that, quote, if I thus truly imitate Christ, I do not imitate anyone but my own way, unquote.
I, I'd
Yeah.
say,
So Jung quotes passages from Isaiah that Christian theologians believe to be a reference to the coming of Jesus. Christian theology insists that Isaiah's, quote, suffering servant, unquote, and man of sorrows, unquote, refers to Jesus, who, following the prophecy, quote, is despised and rejected, end quote. Jung seems to adhere to this interpretation because he continues with a passage that refers to the birth of Jesus, John 1:14. There followers there follows Isaiah's description of the glories of the Messianic era, during which the desert will blossom, the blind will see, the deaf will hear, and parched land will produce springs of water. As Shamdasani notes, Jung mentions this passage elsewhere as an example of the union of the opposites of the destructive and constructive powers of the unconscious. The theme of the union of opposites figures prominently in the Red Book and in Jung's later writings, as perhaps Jung believes that this process will be part of the new revelation. As discussed below, the theme of the union of the opposites becomes important in Jung's discussion of the new God image and the dark side of the self. Um, and just, I just want to comment on this. As I was reading it, I was thinking of our our friend Art Patterson, who is here every week, and he's always the first person to come on the YouTube channel when I open it up each Sunday. And Art is handicapped, as I am. However, um, I'm sure Art does not find, he finds a way to be beyond his handicap, as I do. I mean, I'm 78 years old and I'm still teaching school full time in a really tough school. And so,
well,
um,
and I love the way Art disagrees, has a different perspective, states what he states, asks what he asks, and I don't know that I've ever seen him do it in a way that's conflict. There's a curiosity and a discovery and an interest, and I think that's. I mean, there are many times that we're all three of us are polar to each other.
yeah,
I mean, zero agreement, but there is connection. And I think what's interesting about that is that's to me one of the best expressions of life is just like this passage, the interrelationship of people, the relations of how we interact. And it's like, I find it almost more cool when we don't agree, because I'm learning something about someone else, not to judge them, to have a deeper interest in, oh, my way is only my way, but it's not the only way. And I think that's Art's comments consistently express that the love of life. And it's not always comfortable, but it's true and present. And I
Yeah,
think, even Art's dedication to being here, I don't know that he's come on, the panel that I've seen or remember, but in one sense, he's a fixture. And I,
absolutely.
I think that makes him sacred just to this
Yeah,
show, or this, weekly episode thing. And um so I don't know, I just express my appreciation. I mean, thank you, Art, because you,
yes,
beyond your circumstances are part of your life, and you don't hold back. And I think that's the indomitable spirit, the indefatigable you.
yeah,
And you're a living example of all that.
right. Yes, very much so. And anyway, I need to take a bio break. Can you go back and talk a little bit more about the prophetic nature of the work? And I
Yeah,
will
this
be
this
back.
this page basically is dealing with the mysterium conjunctionis, the mystery of the opposites. And I'd bring up the arcana and tarot, or arcane, and that just means mystery or hidden. And I think the hidden is often the ground we stand on. So I think what's interesting is, instead of the mystery of I don't get it, or I'm trying to find it out there, there's the Irish proverb of, may the ground always reach up to support your every step. And from a Fool tarot perspective, that's even when there wasn't any ground there and you stepped off into the unknown. You don't want to step off of a cliff, but the reality is, if you keep every step unknown, but you listen to the sound and cadence of your feet as you walk, you'll start to inhabit your body in often an instantly numinous way. You are the abracadabra. I mean, the I create as I speak magic. And what's interesting about that is, then it's not such a big deal. It's the only deal. And when you become more present, I think the prophetic nature of the work is that you are always living yourself into being. And we all have our own indoctrinations. We all have our own tomfoolery. Personally, I love when I discover that, or someone calls it out, because instead of being wrong, being angry, joy enters. And because I have an opportunity to shed a skin, to mulch for fresh new colors and discovery and learning. So I like the idea of, we never graduate, we always commence. Because at commencement, when you're given your degree from a college or university, commencement is not an end. Commencement, to commence, means to begin, to go forward, to act, to live into the always next moment. And it's just a milestone in the moment, commencement, because it's going from one place to another, and you realize you're leaving the university into what comes after, whether it's your job, your life, anything. So I think the prophetic nature of the work, the way of what is to come, has a lot to do with the infinitive phrase to commence. And to commence is always a now kind of moment. So hopefully Skip will come back soon because I'm pretty much out of words there. So that perhaps Jung believes that this process will be part of the new revelation. Well, the new revelation, that's what's to come. There's a comfortability with the not knowing in a proper commencement. You don't know, but this day you're all dressed up, sitting, standing, in a sense, self-worshiping that, look, I got this award, I got this degree, I got this title, I got this color belt, depending. And I think what's interesting is you're sitting right on the edge of the synapse, the space between. And if you live that space between as your verb, your breath itself is the only prayer required. And he's back.
I am back. And
a little soliloquy.
I took a little extra time because I was reminded that I have to put together a birthday gift for a dear friend who is experiencing a 10-year birthday, which I recently passed in a couple of weeks, and I decided what I'm going to give him. And what I went and I found my violet ink, and I'm going to use my violet ink to I have a new calligraphy pen that I purchased, and I'm going to transcribe in original form for him, the eternal moment.
Interesting, because this came yesterday.
Can you show me the inside of it? Calligraphy set. Cool.
Still in the plastic. Haven't opened it.
Oh, okay.
But I figured I'm going to get back into some typography kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, mine is a little bit different. In a weak moment, I have this outfit, Temu, that keeps following me. And in a weak moment, I ordered this executive vibe pen.
Oh, nice.
And the nice thing about this pen, it is intended to be a calligraphy pen, and I've not used it yet, but it has it's got a very whippy nib. So I don't know if you can see the nib, but let's see if I press my finger again against it, you'll see that it spreads, the tine spread.
That's like a brush pen, semi brush fountain pen kind of.
Yeah.
Nice flexible.
And I hadn't decided what color ink I was going to use until just now, when I took the moment to look for my my ink, which had been stashed in my mother-in-law's apartment since she's living with us now. And so I have the ink, I have the whippy pen, and I have the piece that I want to transcribe, which is the eternal moment. And for those of you who don't know what the eternal moment is, I'm going to grab it and read it to you. Here it is. I have done it in calligraphy before, twice before for grandsons. But anyway, the great thing is now and here. This is the eternal moment. And if you do not realize it, you have missed the best part of life. You have missed the realization that you were once the carrier of life, contained between the poles of an unimaginable future and an unimaginably remote past. Millions of years and untold millions of ancestors have worked up to this moment, and you are the fulfillment of this eternal moment. One should take each moment as the eternal moment, as if nothing were going to change, not anticipating a faraway future. For the future always grows out of that which is. You must live life in such a spirit that you make in every moment the best of the possibilities. C.G. Jung. And um, and this was quoted from paragraph 330 of Mysterium Conjunctionis. And
I think this whole mystery of the opposites, Mysterium Conjunctionis, is really the heart of the prophetic message here.
yeah,
And I think that's important because there's Mysterium Conjunctionis, the conjunction. I mean, people say conjunctionis. What is that? Well, Latin doesn't have a J. So it's the mystery of the conjunction.
yeah.
So that's the disappearing path. That's the S line and the yin yang. That's the Buddhist invisible path. It's the place of both, and. Instead of either or, are you too conscious? Are you too soulful? I mean, spirit, soul. Why not both?
Yeah.
And I think the mystery of both is the constantly, consistently living it into being, where my physical breath itself, which is invisible, is my soulful spiritual prayer. Breath is prayer enough. Or simply, even further, breath is prayer. And so there's a notion there that just equates to one word: life.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the new God image, which surely will take at least this half hour that we have left. It will probably go over, I suspect. But let me get a start on it. The new God image. Jung mentions God innumerable times through the Red Book, as he does throughout the collected works. In the Red Book, he is obviously preoccupied with the notion that a new image of God is emerging, which he mentions in several places, for example, the coming God in the form of the divine child. After the vision of the death of Siegfried, he became aware of the birth of a new God image, which was born as a child from my own soul, although conceived with resistance. This new God could only be born when the hero had been killed, because the hero is perfection and is therefore an enemy of God, because perfection has no need of God. In his 1925 seminar, commenting on this passage, Jung says that the hero referred to his intellect or the superior function. Andreas Schweitzer believes that the enunciation of the birth of God in the soul is the most profound and central message of the Red Book. In what way is God born in the soul? For Jung, the soul is the organ of perception that apprehends the contents of the unconscious and gives birth to its dynamis in the form of a symbol. The birth of God in the soul means a new consciousness of the divine, or the development of a new image of God in the psyche. This idea is antithetical to traditional notions of the external savior or redeemer. Rather, according to Jung, the anointed of this time is a God who does not appear in the flesh. He is no man and yet is a son of man, but in spirit and not in flesh. Hence, he can be born only through the spirit of men as the conceiving womb of the God. And I would add men and women. Jung was writing at a time 120 years ago.
Right.
By following Eckert's notion of the birth of the divine within the self of the individual, which for Jung occurs during the lifelong process of individuation, Jung is clearly taking the opposite position to Nietzsche's proclamation that God is dead. Instead, for Jung, a new God image is emerging. One of the complaints of the spirits of the dead who visit Jung at his home in 1916 is that they could not find what they sought in Jerusalem. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung reports that these dead represent the voices of the unanswered, unresolved, and unredeemed. In other words, these are the voices of those who could not find spiritual solutions in traditional religion, adding to the urgency and or the of the need for a new God image. As Jung later notes in his correspondence with Victor White, religious truth is best thought of as a thing living in the human soul and not as an abstruse and unreasonable relic of the past. Religions require renewal. The advocates of Christianity squander their energies in the mere preservation of what has come down to them, with no thought of building onto their house and making it roomier. He believes that such stagnation threatens a lethal end to the tradition. Jung insists that our gods require renewal. If the god grows old, he becomes shadow, nonsense, and he goes down. He declares that the image of the God yet to come appears as supreme meaning. And those who worship him must worship him in the image of the supreme meaning. He stresses that it is not the coming God himself, but his image which appears in the supreme meaning. Here, God's stress on God, or Jung's stress on God, as an intrapsychic image presages his later insistence on the distinction between the divine itself and our images of the divine. He makes 2 points in these passages. One is that a new God image is going to emerge. Another seems to be that the divine appears in the form of whatever is the most meaningful to the individual, or that whatever is most meaningful to us becomes the God we worship. As he will later say more clearly, our God is whatever is of the highest value in the personality. Jung stresses the importance of meaning in several places in his later work, especially in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, where he points out that meaning allows suffering to be bearable that would otherwise be unbearable.
Well, and that's the whole
Okay,
thought.
I'll stop there and let you comment before we go on.
Just one simple one. I mean, take take a look at the book or the movie, The Unbearable Lightness of Being.
Mm.
And I think there's a both and just in the title. But I'll stop there because I think that if people aren't familiar with the book or the movie, The Unbearable Lightness of Being, that it's a powerful work.
Yeah, Richard makes an interesting point. He says Protestant theology is the least theology. If Jung had been a Catholic, I wonder what would have happened. Good question. I don't know.
I
Um,
don't know, but I bet not a lot of this because there's too much shame involved.
Well, I would say that Jung, in his later works, seems to have been attracted to Catholic theology, and Catholic approaches. And I'll say one thing in my numinous experiences uh, bears that out, and that was when I was in the second grade. We moved to a place called Paw, Michigan, which is this little town west of Kalamazoo, Michigan. And my parents, one was a Methodist and one was a Lutheran, decided that they would check out the various churches in the neighborhood to see what suited them. And mind you, the churches they had been going to up to that point had been Navy chapels, which are what quite normally quite ecumenical and therefore more, let's say, Presbyterian. And and so we went to different services at different churches for a period of a couple of months. And one time my father dropped us off in front of a church, and I guess he hadn't paid much attention to the sign because it was the Catholic church in the community. And my mother and we three children, I being the eldest at second grade age, um, walk into this church, and my brother and I are going, "Wow, isn't this cool? Look at all these images and the baptismal font and the carvings and everything. Isn't this great?" And we were totally drawn in by it, and we sat down, and the church service went by, and my father never came in because in the time that he was parking the car, he realized there was a Catholic church and he refused to go in. And so, anyway, obviously, we became Presbyterians rather than anything else. And
That's funny. That reminds me of um, being in Laredo, Texas, in third grade, and we just moved there, way South Texas, right on the border. Um, and the public school wanted to skip me from third to sixth grade. And I'm like, Mom, one, they'll kick my ass. But two, it's not that I'm that smart. They're doing the same stuff I did last year in the previous city's school. And so she got me into the Catholic private school. I grew up Methodist, whatever, but um, you have to go to mass once a week, right?
yeah,
Except I'm not Catholic, so I'm not allowed to take communion.
right.
And all I really thought was, well, they get to go eat and drink and then come back and kneel and rest and pray. And I have to stand the whole time. So I remember thinking, well, I'll just fake that I'm dizzy and I'm feeling nauseous. And okay, poor third grade judgment. Mother Superior says, "Oh, well, I'll show you what to do. You During the mass, we'll go sit you out here on the concrete. Just put your head down between your knees and keep it there." Well, the whole time. So I I felt like, wow, I, I'm suffering standing. I don't get to kneel and eat and have communion and drink kind of thing. And I just remember thinking, wow, I didn't understand at the time, damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah.
But it was certainly your dad sitting out there in the car, you know, oops.
Yeah. Well, anyway, times have changed. Um,
Yeah.
my third daughter was married in a Catholic church, um, and half the congregation, the side on the left, knew all the readbacks, and the side on the right didn't.
Right? That's like,
Anyway, all
well, there's
right.
Presbyterian conjunctionists. You get the other, both and one side and the other together.
It was a wonderful ceremony and um, a wonderful priest who officiated, and I enjoyed it very much. During the encounter with Elijah and Salome, Jung is told that the soul brings tidings of the new God image and the mysteries of his service. In this active imagination, a black serpent winds itself around Jung's body as if he is crucified. His head becomes that of a lion, depicting the Mithraic god Ion, and his blood is squeezed out of him in an imitation of Christ. Importantly, he notes that the serpent is the earthly essence of man, of which he is not conscious, the mystery that flows to him from the nourishing earth mother. That is, this complex symbol expresses a combination of Mithraic and Christian imagery, and at the same time, Jung is gripped by the Earth Mother, a chthonic aspect of the divine that has been neglected by Christianity. All this means that in the process of giving birth to the new God image, all these mysteries must be contained within it. Elijah tells Jung that he and Salome have been one since eternity. These are important figures for Jung. He has been told to announce the new God image. But Elijah was a fierce defender of the traditional God image, and Salome was responsible for the death of John the Baptist, who was a herald of the new Christian God image. Later, at the beginning of Liber Secundus, Jung quotes a passage from Jeremiah that warns against false prophets and warns people not to rely on dreams and personal revelations. Since he puts this passage in the midst of his own revelations, it seems that Jung might be struggling with the notion that a new God image will be born in the soul. Nevertheless, Jung describes the birth of a new symbol within himself. This symbol is the divine Son, who is the supreme meaning, the symbol, the passing over into a new creation. This is a remarkable development. And later, he will note that the development of the redeeming symbol takes place where it is least expected and from an improbable place. He insists that he is not the supreme meaning himself, but the symbol becomes in me such that it has its substance and I mine. Thus I stand like Peter in worship before the miracle of the transformation and the beginning and the becoming real of the God in me. He says that he is not the Son of God himself, but he represents this God as one who was a mother to the God because he symbolically gave birth to the Son of God in himself. Therefore, um, he is one to whom, in the name of God, of the God and freedom of the binding and loosing has been given, the binding and loosing takes place in me. This statement refers to Matthew 18:18, which says that whatever the apostles allow or disallow, loose or bind, will be ratified in heaven if it is God's will. This binding and loosing takes place in him, but does not happen according to his personal will. He insists he is the servant of this transformation, like the Pope. I do not believe that this is a grandiose attempt to see himself as the Pope or a new religion, because he adds that it is incredible to believe such of oneself. It applies not to me, but to the symbol. He realizes he is not on a par with his visions, and he is in danger of believing that I myself am significant since I see the significant. In this context, it is important that that Jung told Carrie Fink that he believed that Philemon was the same figure who inspired Buddha, Mani, Christ, and Muhammad, who all communed with God. But Jung wanted to remain a psychologist who understood this process rather than identify with such a figure. It is noteworthy that by the side of Jung's painting of Philemon, Jung places a quotation from the Bhagavad Gita in which Krishna says that he will incarnate whenever the world needs him. The implication is that Philemon might be a divine avatar of or the herald of one. Okay, I'll stop there for a minute.
And it's interesting that a herald of one, that one is not capitalized. So the
Yes.
herald of one, meaning you, me, anyone,
Yeah.
rather than a divine capital O one being God. So that is just from the not capitalizing one, we are each part of the divine together.
Now, I have been talking about this at length uh, in um, in my advanced reading group, which we do on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And so um, others are certainly welcome to join us. And I'm just going to show you uh, by sharing what they're referring to, because there's one image of Philemon that Jung himself painted, and which is in the Red Book, and this is the Red Book from the Red Book, and I'll just increase this. So here's Philemon, but here on the left in the margin is this quote from the Bhagavad Gita that Corbett is referring to. And it's the only place in the Red Book that is written in English. Everything else is written in German calligraphy. But uh, for some reason, Jung put this in English in the Red Book. Now, it would be nice to ask him why that is, but in any case, what he's saying is that the manifestation of God um, will will emerge when needed, um, and that's the Bhagavad Gita was written um, 5,000 years before Christ. And so um, it's a very significant passage for that reason. And therefore, if you take things to their logical conclusion, then every atom has within it the possibility of the emergence of God when things go terribly bad. Okay. That's the implication, and that's the position that I took in the advanced reading group. And if by any chance any of you want to come to the advanced reading group, I will give you the link here in a moment. But go ahead, Jordan. You want to say something here?
Well, I think the joke comes to mind that Adam and Eve um, had two very specific firsts. They had the first computer and it crashed in one bite. And Adam and Eve were the first to not read the Apple service agreement and just click, I agree.
Oh yes. Okay. Wait a minute here. And this is copy. And now for the YouTube audience. Let's see if I can get this in.
I'm gonna need to go.
Yeah. Okay.
I think
Um, all right. Where are we? We are.
we're I think stopped at let me see. That a new God image will be born in the soul, or
Right. Okay. We are at the bottom of page 59. And so we
yeah,
can put a well, I'll tell you what, you can go. I'll go ahead and read this last bit
okay.
in this section so that everybody gets that. And
Thanks for the day.
y-
Have a great week, everyone.
yeah, thanks for being here, Jordan.
Definitely.
Um, okay, so yeah, okay. So reading on then. We have to wonder whether this revelatory material inspired the mandala on page 125 of the Red Book, which depicts a human being suspended between the human realm below and the transpersonal realm above. He seems to be holding a vase on the crown of his head, into which is pouring a substance emerging from the obvious self symbol above him. The overpowering impression of this image is of an infusion of divine energy into the crown chakra. Okay, I think I might have that image. Let me just check, just so you can see what we're talking about here. Um, I have to get myself back into the Red Book images again. No, I don't seem to have it. Just a moment. What I thought it might be is not the one. Um, maybe I can get it up by getting up the entire Red Book. Let's see. Yeah, I'm getting to it. Just a moment. It's coming along. Ten more pages. Let's see. Yes. Okay, I see. What he is, that about which he is speaking. Not sure I can, let's see if I can get it smaller. I do have it. Okay, so here we come. I'm going to share it with you so you know what the image looks like in the actual folio edition of the Red Book. Okay, so here's the image. I'll read about it again. Um, We have to wonder whether this revelatory material inspired the mandala on page 125 of the Red Book, which depicts a human being suspended between the human realm below and the transpersonal realm above. He seems to be holding a vase on the crown of his head into which is pouring a substance emerging from the obvious self symbol above him. The overwhelming impression of this image is of an infusion of divine energy into the crown chakra. Okay, now this image is interesting for a number of other reasons, um, besides the energy going into the crown chakra. I'll share with you my thoughts on that. Um, in in down here, there's an army that is uh, doing target practice, um, and there's a cannon that is pointed out to sea, among other things. There's obvious military guys there, and there's a flower garden around a lawn. There's chitty ching chitty chitty bang bang cars and a couple of motorcycles going along there, and kind of choppy waves and a couple of ships up here below the guy, and it's a river boat of some sort. Uh, and so, just for interest's sake, I mean, this is quite an impressive image. It's one of my favorites from the Red Book. Okay, we're going to stop that share. Yeah, and Archiphanus says the solar cross is a Gnostic cross, which could represent a quaternity, the four seasons, the cardinal directions, the four ends of life, etc. It stands for wholeness and or union with the pleroma, the bythos, or the monad. I agree with all of that. So, um, okay, so going on then. In his encounter with the mythical figure Izdubar, who is dying, Jung recognizes that our God image may be sick. He tries to heal the pitiable Izdubar, who has been hurt by the advent of science, which reduces our ability to believe in the gods. Jung insists that we must heal our gods. Reading this, we are reminded that Jung refers to the mythologies of the dying and resurgent God as the representation of a transformation of attitude that results in a new manifestation of life. He suggests that the healing or renewal of God, for us, the God image, takes place in the divine sphere, i.e., in the unconscious. The implication is that the renewal of the God image is a psychological process that emerges from the unconscious, which was the process Jung experienced during the writing of the Red Book. to heal Izdubar, Jung decides that Izdubar is only real as a fantasy, paradoxically. By declaring him a figment of the imagination, Izdubar said, quote, so long as we leave the God outside as apparent and tangible, he is unbearable and hopeless. But if we turn the God into fantasy, he is in us and is easy to bear. This idea is testament both to the religious importance of the imaginatio as a way of giving new life to our image of God and to Jung's insistence that the self is experienced deeply within our own subjectivity rather than as an outer transcendent divinity. Jung believes that he can carry this idea into the West, and this is important for religious development in the West. The idea that the gods are products of the psyche makes the notion of the reality of the psyche crucial. In this context, it is noteworthy that Elijah points out that he and Salome are real. The view that the psyche is a domain in its own right contrasts with the current mainstream belief that psyche is only an epiphenomenon of the brain, which would mean that the gods have no independent ontological reality. One of Jung's images of the new God image as the divine child is depicted in a painting of the god Faunus, which Shamdasani describes in a long footnote based on Jung's description of the Black Books. The name means light bringer, or that which causes to appear. Faunus was an ancient god of procreation and new life in the Orphic tradition, where he is a dying and rising God of light and goodness, who is both male and female. He is a primordial being who is said to have emerged from the world egg at the beginning of time. So he represents a new beginning. Shamdasani believes that Faunus is Jung's God. Perhaps he is important to Jung not only because he gives Jung a sense of renewal, but also because he embodies the cosmogonic principle of love and creative force. The legend to this image says that this is the image of the divine child. It means the completion of a long path. I called him Faunus because he is the newly appearing God. It is significant that Faunus is said to have been born from Ion, the solar god of the Mithraic mysteries, who is the lion-headed god that appeared in Jung's vision during his encounter with Salome. Okay, so a bunch of ideas to talk about here. I'm going to look for my picture first of Izdubar so that you can understand, in a sense, how funny this story is. But let's see, share Izdubar. Okay, so here's Izdubar. And in this passage, here's Jung, very tiny Jung down at the bottom of it, his eye. And he's looking up at this giant Izdubar who represents old time religion. And in the course of this passage, Izdubar starts to become sick. And the reason he's sick is because science has been talking about him as not real. And he doesn't like the fact that science is talking about him as not real because he feels quite real. He, Izdubar, feels quite real. And And so Jung decides that the way to heal Izdubar is to squeeze him down into the size of an egg and put him in his pocket and carry him home to Switzerland, where he knows his followers will accept Izdubar as real, and therefore Izdubar will be healed. And and so that's quite a profound uh, piece. And if you haven't read the Red Book, I urge you to read about Izdubar on that part, because it's very, very telling about what Jung is saying about the new God image. And the other thing I wanted to talk about here is that the creation of a symbol. Okay, because symbols um, are created when there are opposites, and we human beings are not able to define what's right and wrong when we have opposites. And what the psyche does is it doesn't say this side is correct and this side is incorrect. What it does is it presents a symbol which embodies the both sides. Okay, it embodies the central point, which is the significance of the cross and the Gnostic cross and all that. And I mean, the cross is a huge symbol in Christianity, of course, and it represents the device on which Christ died, but it also is a symbol for the bringing together of everything. That's why it is so powerful as a symbol. It's not because um, it's not because it was the torture device for Jesus Christ. It is because it is a symbol of bringing everything together in one place. The above and the below, the left and the right, the two sides of a a duality. So I hope that that's helpful. Um, it takes a long time. It took me 20 years or so to get to the point where I could understand what Jung was talking about, very honestly. And it wasn't until after the Red Book came out and then some of this other writing came out where I had already, when that happened, I had already been studying Jung for 22 years. And so, uh, I knew it was something, it was important, and I kept doing it and reading Jung's books on airplanes because I thought it was important. But but I didn't really know why until the Red Book came out, and I all these things started to come together, and so yes, correct. And Richard says the cross is the tree of life, um, and the tree of life is also a pregnant woman, okay, or a woman. Uh, you know, women represent the tree of life because they can take the opposites of themselves and their spouse and using all the opposites that are in both of their beings create a child. And that's why the child is divine in part. And so all of these things are very symbolic. Just look, see if I can find this one thing. Um, did a painting which I called the Tree of Life. And I just want to share that with you. Okay, I gave it to my eldest daughter on her 50th birthday. And here is the painting, which I can share with you. And there you can see that my daughter seems quite happy with the painting. And you know, there's a lot in this painting, so you'd have to study it for many hours to really appreciate everything about it. Well, this is on this day, my 50-year-old daughter giving me a big daughterly smile for having put that painting together for her, the Tree of Life. Okay, so let's see what else we have, and then I'll need to move on. Out of there. Okay. Um, Kathy says, I've thought that the sun is more than what we think. Of course it is. It's a symbol. And Richard, yes, the mystic spirits can grow and shrink in size. I've seen it. Richard says there's mysticism in the Bible. In the Psalms, it infers the sun with the sun. And yeah, of course, but they're both things are symbols. That a son, your son or your grandson or a daughter, they're all symbols as well. And it's the tool by which man is unified with the divine. Sacred blood is split upon the skull of the first Adam, redeeming him from his fall by the second Adam. And August Moon says, oh no, do I have 20 years? Well, no, you don't need 20 years because I guess I've spoiled the ending for you. So you can start with the ending and then go back and see if you agree with me. And she says, whereby until we search for God with all our hearts and leave the human side in the dust, we find eternal life with all our hearts. Yes. And, you know, what I would say is that this search is not something that you can force. In other words, yes, it helps to read Jung and to understand these things, but you're only going to grok it when you grok it, and that moment will probably be when you recognize a numinous experience for being a numinous experience. It really is it's a joining of two things probably, and I guess in the context of my chapel experience, it's the joining of my depression with the joy that I felt after I had the experience. As Richard was correctly pointing out, it is joyful. And you know, if I suppose we all of us think of a autobiography at some point, or you know, it's said that, you know, if you're dying, you have your life run through your mind as you're dying, and you know, you review your life. But you know, what I would say is that the things that stick with me that I remember from my whole life we're all numinous experiences. And, I wasn't, for example, thinking of that christening of my grandson. And yet that certainly was a luminous experience for me. And pretty much all the things that I remember going all the way back to the first things I can remember were numinous events. Yeah. And so Richard says, you know, I've found that my searches over, I'm just trying to make sense of all the stops I had on this way. And Archiphanes says, chop down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze on the in the tender grass of the field, and let him be and let him be wet with the dew of heaven, and let this his portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 periods of time pass over him. Right. I mean, we're all going to be chopped down in due course. And, what can I tell you? We have to be good with that. And so, as Andy Warhol once said, if you want to be immortal, make something that will be immortal. And therefore, he made art. And so, I guess with that, I'll close and thank you, everyone, for being here today. We'll see you next week, and we'll finish this essay by Lionel Corbett. Peace.